Hugo's ego reveal changes everything about Blue Lock and turns the whole story upside down. Up till now, we've only thought that being a striker and being an egoist were pretty much synonymous. We had midfielders like Hiyori, who we did see as egoists, but we always saw it as a lesser form of egoism than being a striker. We see characters like Isagi, Baro, Rin, Shido. They were all exemplary examples of egoism since they all have their own motivation and their own goal, and they all play for their goals. And that was the embodiment of an egoist and a striker. But now we have this antagonist, Hugo, which seems to have a completely different philosophy to that of Blue Lock, yet he's recently revealed in this new chapter that he is an egoist. And not just an egoist, Isagi considers him a bigger egoist than himself. So we're going to dig into this because I think it's a really good opportunity to go back in the story and really figure out what makes someone an egoist and how this all comes together and figure out what it really means for the story, because I think the ramifications are huge. So what does it really mean to be an egoist? Fundamentally, does it mean you only play to score, you only play as a striker? Well, not exactly. The first example we see of a very egotistical character is Baro, because he basically represents the first thing we think about when we think of egoism. Someone who plays only for himself, he refuses to pass to other people, and he only scores his own goals. And he doesn't assist anyone else. He wants to be the king of the field. So the story basically presents him as an antagonistic force. But it makes us wonder, is this the definition of egoism? Should Isagi play this way in order to be an egoist? But we see that actually, no. There are different ways to go about being the best striker, and not everyone has to follow that path. Isagi, for example, he actually does a lot of assisting plays in different games while he's trying to survive in Blue Lock and while he's trying to prove his value and stay in the team, right? So he does a lot in the process of being in Blue Lock that isn't just playing for his own goal. But every single time he does so, he is doing so with the desire of evolving into the best striker. Even if he's playing in an assisting role in certain situations, ultimately his main goal is to get his own goal. And when that's not available, he's at least trying to evolve into a better striker, or at least pave a path towards future goals, discovering his own formula, picking up new puzzle pieces, and evolving as a striker. The first time he assists isn't quite like this, right? When he passes to Kunigami in the first game, he does feel like he failed himself because he realizes he's doing it kind of out of cowardice. So that is not the best example, obviously. But other examples, such as in the Neo Egoist League, he does a lot of passes. He passes to Kunigami in the Barcha game, then he passes to Yukamiya in the Manshine game. Both of those examples actually have very clear desires behind them, like that he doesn't have the same feeling of remorse behind them because he understands why he did it, and he was actually playing as an egoist, even in those assisting roles. When he passes to Kunigami in the first game, he's doing so out of a desire to create his own system and basically show that you don't need to play around Kaiser, because at this point, Kaiser is the king of the field, and he's trying to usurp that by finding ways to present his own value and produce new playmaking opportunities that don't utilize Kaiser. And he realizes the easiest way to do that in that moment is to pass to Kunigami. It's actually Yukamiya, the person he passes to next in the next game, that actually tells him, like, oh, you shouldn't have passed to Kunigami. But he's trying to explain, actually, I am doing so as a way of showing my value. I'm not being delusional. I am just doing what I have to do to survive in this moment. To survive, but show my value. It's funny because Yukamiya is actually set up as an antagonistic character in the situation, but in the next game, he actually passes to him for the game-winning goal again. And he's doing it in this situation, which is interesting because in that same game, he actually gets mad when Kunigami steals one of his goals, and he actually because he is trying to play for his own goals there. But during that same match, as the game continues, his desire changes because at this point in the game, Kaiser blocks a lot of his shot opportunities, etc. So in the last moment when Kaiser is trying to get that last goal, he actually prevents that from happening. So he passed Yukimiya. Kaiser failed to anticipate Yukimiya's goal because Isagi was actually including him as a piece, and Kaiser had not included him as a piece. So in that sense, Isagi's vision and his puzzle pieces with egocentrism that he unlocked in this game is what allowed him to get that game-winning assist. So yes, he didn't score the final goal, but he had a massive win over Kaiser and a massive win as an egoist, right? He affirmed his desires, which was to destroy Kaiser and his system, and he successfully did that. Enough to at least consider himself equal to Kaiser when it comes to being king of the field. So again, it's all connected, and all those pieces that led him to evolve, not all of them are for him scoring, but assisting, and all of that was important because he is still ultimately laying down the pieces he needs to become the best striker he can. So yes, the fundamental piece isn't necessarily scoring your own goals. It's, are you playing to your desires? We even see another character in the next game, Hiyori, and he is the first example of an egoist that is not a striker, or at least the first poignant example, because we do see Nico, for example. He's a character that wanted to be a striker, but then in the U20 game, he reveals that he actually enjoys destroying the strikers and shutting down their shooting courses, and he finds a joy in being a defender. So we do see that there is ways to be egotistical that are not being a striker. But at that point, we see Hiyori. Hiyori basically feels like he doesn't want to be a striker. And there is a sense that Hiyori sort of settled into his desire to be a midfielder. He ultimately finds a desire there, which is to create the world's best striker. And he finds his desire when he plays alongside Isagi and does a game-winning pass in the Ubers game. So he feels like the important caveat is that he did not play for Isagi. He's not doing the pass for Isagi, but he's doing this for his own desire, which he discovers, which is he finds excitement in creating the world's best striker with his passes, right? So when Isagi says, "Oh, let's team up," be the guy who feeds me passes, he says, "No, I'm not doing this for you, right? If you can't keep up with my passes, I'm gonna discard you," right? So it's very much an egotistical type of supporting play. So we do realize this is a thing. This was around 200 chapters ago. We realize that it is a possibility to be an egoist while not being a striker. But it's only up to this recent arc where we really see the potential of that, and where we meet a character who doesn't just have an ego, but has an ego that surpasses that of Isagi's while playing as a non-striker. But first, before we do that, let's talk about the France match and Karasu's recent development as an egoist, or should I say abandonment of egoism. So this is when the conversation starts going back to Karasu and his play in France. He realizes that playing around Isagi doesn't work anymore, and the strategy that Blue Lock has been using isn't working. And that part is actually true. That is actually a correct assessment. But where he goes wrong, I believe, at least when it comes to being an egoist, is what he decides to do. So Karasu basically adopts Hugo's philosophy of suitable destiny, adopts the philosophy that he should take the position that most aligns to his ability. He's going to play logical, and for Blue Lock's sake, he will change and win this game. And what that change is to no longer play like an egoist, no longer play for his own goals, but help others score their own goals. So Karasu decides to pass to an extraordinary striker, which is Hiyori. He decides to pass to Hiyori. And Hiyori, being a midfielder, decides to pass to Karasu when he's at an optimal position. So Karasu now has a chance to score. But what does he do? In the face of a shot opportunity, he decides to play optimally and pass back to Hiyori. This is where he goes against ego. He says he sees the potential in Hiyori, and for his own sake that he should change his fate and score. So it's interesting because Karasu is basically telling Hiyori the opposite of what Hugo is telling Isagi. I find that kind of interesting. He basically says, you have the potential to be an extraordinary striker, even if you aren't aware of it. So basically, he sees the potential in Hiyori to be a striker, and he wants him to score. And I find that interesting. But regardless, going back to the point, and this is the interesting part, he tells Hiyori, the idea I've came to of putting everything to being second best. The path to victory lies in self-sacrifice. What does he mean by self-sacrifice? he is sacrificing his own desires here, sacrificing his desire to be a striker for the sake of the win. That is the path to victory, he says. So he tells Hiyori to aim for the head, and he shoots at him. And I find that really cool because he's actually a really cool reference to Hiyori playing video games, and he's always shot zombies in the head. I find that really cool. So it's a cool callback to that. But it's also metaphor for Karasu basically sacrificing himself. He is metaphorically letting Hiyori cut off his head here, and he scores the goal. So this actually works. Karasu, by playing self-sacrifice and playing suitably in a way that Hugo says is the most optimal way to win, Karasu actually succeeds at getting the first goal of the France game with Hiyori's help. But this immediately strikes Isagi the wrong way, because Isagi is someone who is an egoist, and he realizes that the way Karasu got that goal was a manner that goes completely against egoism. Again, more Hugo aura farming and telling Isagi that he has to play like Karasu. He has to play like a second best instead of playing like a striker. Rin is the one that comes in when Isagi is basically considering what Hugo's saying. And it says, second best is so tepid. Our destiny is devouring each other to be the best. And I find that really cool. And it's kind of a callback to Rin and Sei's philosophy. Rin and his brother Sei wanted to be strikers. But then Sei decided to basically quit on his dream to be a striker and become a midfielder because he realized it was more suitable for him. So in a sense, Sei actually has the philosophy of Hugo, at least to some degree. We haven't really seen Sei's philosophy, but that is the vibe I'm getting. So I actually believe all of this side point, but I actually believe a lot of thematics are all basically set up for Sei's involvement in future games and how that contrasts Rin and Isagi's philosophy. But aside that, I find it really cool that Rin shows his philosophy here, and he's of course also an egoist. And he also, I think deep down, Rin wants someone to play alongside him. He actually is at his best when he is challenging someone, when he's playing along someone else. Not to say that he plays for someone else, but when he is devouring someone else, when he is playing alongside, Sei, or Isagi, or someone who wants to be the best alongside him, that is when he's at his optimal performance. And that is partially why leaving him is a huge hit to his ego. It's such a defining moment for his character. So I find that really cool. So just that's a kind of side point. I'm opening a lot of can of worms here, but I want to keep going. I find it really cool because we're talking about desire, and Ego looks at this goal and he says, I didn't expect this. I had no desire for this chemical reaction. So again, Ego himself is an egoist, and part of the Blue Lock project is him getting his desire to create the number one striker, or at least get the World Cup more specifically, and doing so via his own philosophy. So when people go against his philosophy, it goes against his desire. So I think, again, the way Ego goes about being an egoist is actually very clear in the way he runs the Blue Lock project. He likes it when people follow his philosophy. He likes it when people follow his guiding principles. And when they go against him, in a sense, it's like you're challenging him personally. And I think that will actually tie back into the next part, which is really important. So the next chapter is basically Isagi and Karasu arguing about whether that was a proper way to play. So Karasu is basically saying, hey, you want to play alongside me? Let's keep using this method. I'll figure out a way to score goals, and I'll be the second best. But Isagi basically asks him, but are you okay with throwing away your life as a striker, Karasu? And Karasu basically is confused by this. He says, I'm not throwing it away. I know you've done stuff like this before, temporarily assisting to help set up a team for the win. And he's right. Isagi has assisted people. Isagi has assisted and been a more supporting player. Isagi, he could tell something's not right, but he can't really articulate it. He says, something about your new attitude doesn't seem right. Karasu was like, well, you can't even verbalize it, so don't start dissing me about it. And I love that response. He's so logical. I love Karasu. I think Isagi and Karasu are very cool characters, and I love how the story portrays logical characters. He says, unlike what you're doing, I'm trying to change for the sake of Blue Lock. There is where Isagi notices something. He still can't figure out what the issue is exactly, but he notices there when he says, for the sake of Blue Lock. And he tells him, you just said for the sake of Blue Lock. That's not the way of an egoist. Egoists aren't playing for Blue Lock or anyone's sake. They're playing for themselves. And I think he's actually right here. Karasu is playing for others. He's not playing for himself. He passed to Hiyori when he could have scored himself, just for, I guess, a slightly more optimal pass, right? For a more optimal approach, for a more surefire way to score. And that is not how he has been taught by Ego to play. Isagi says everyone should be striving to be the best striker. That's how Blue Lock is. And when you're prioritizing the team and playing as second best, you're not playing like Blue Lock. Karius was basically, he's kind of diverting here. He's basically saying, well, you could score your own goal. He's not actually acknowledging the point he's making. He's like, fuck it, just play for your own goal, then you're trash. You're losing. He's actually right in some sense. He's saying, well, right now I'm providing value, and you playing through the egoist philosophy aren't doing anything. So who's right? It looks to me like you're spinning your wheels when you're just ordinary and you're just ruining Blue Lock. And I find that really funny because he's like really good at dissing people. That's always been a consistent character trait of Karasu. He's good at just trash talking. And I think that also ties into his personality and actually his themes. You see in the very beginning when he's first introduced, he's characterized by his ability to see others' weaknesses in their playstyles, and he's also able to see the weak link in a team. So he's actually doing that here, and that's something I really love about the characterization in Blue Lock. It's always very consistent, or at least it usually is very consistent. And traits that existed from the very beginning often get reintroduced into the story in a more interesting or thematically elaborate way. And the story elaborates on that at a thematic level later on. And this is what we're seeing here. So I actually predicted that Karasu would be someone who would do this. He would be someone that, even before this chapter happened, I always thought Karasu would be the kind of player that decides to play the most optimal, even just the most surefire way of success, even if it means not necessarily playing to his own desires. He's a bit of a defeatist. He said it from the very beginning. He only takes challenges he knows he can win. That's why he targets weak links. That's why he targets weak points. He uses his logic to deduce weak points and take advantage of them. But I think it also sort of ties into his character flaw because he's able to see others' weaknesses, including his own. And I think his awareness of his own weaknesses is actually what makes him struggle to be an egoist. He's aware of how others are better than him in certain ways, and he knows where he has to position himself in order to play in a manner that provides the most value for who he is, which is what he's doing. He's playing suitably. And then Isagi just crashes out at him after he gets this. He's like, I'm thinking about Blue Lock too. And that's where, again, Karasu being very logical, very calm, because he's very good at that, staying calm and logical. He calls out this contradiction. Again, he calls out the weak point. He can see weak points in people's arguments, the same way you can see people's weak points in people's play styles. I love that. He says, look, you said it yourself, for Blue Lock, how different are you from me? There you go. So he basically wins his argument. But he's not actually, I think, while he did call Isagi out in their contradiction, I think they're both wrong. Isagi is wrong because he is not aware of this subtle contradiction, or at least he might have slipped up and said for Blue Lock when he means for himself. But I think there is still a part of Isagi which is playing for the team. He's not aware that he should be playing for himself. And I think that comes down to, this is more of a prediction, but I think Isagi is still clinging on to playing for ego. He's playing to please ego and not pleasing himself. When he should be using ego as a stepping stone for his own ideals, for his own philosophy, I think he sort of sees ego as a parental figure that he has to please, when in reality he should be seeing him as a stepping stone, as a piece of the puzzle, and another piece that he can use and learn from, but for his own sake. And this is when the match continues. And we see Hugo keeps talking about destiny and how this is all inevitable, blah. Again, Hugo's philosophy. I actually like how Ren calls him a perfectionist. I find that's really interesting because I think he's, again, relating him to Sei was also a perfectionist. He realized he couldn't be a striker. Maybe he couldn't be the best striker in the world, and then decided to quit on being a striker because he wanted to be the best midfielder in the world, which is actually a perfectionist / defeatist attitude, which is what he's poking fun at here. People who want to be the best at something, they want to be perfect at something, and when they're not that, they decide to quit on their dreams. But anyways, we see Isagi still in turmoil, and at this point in the match, I was under the wrong impression. This is where the match completely subverts my expectation. Because I thought, we have this character Karasu. He sacrifices his desire in order to play suitably. And he's basically taking Hugo's philosophy. And I thought that basically Karasu for the rest of the game was going to be like a foil for Hugo. He's going to represent the version of Isagi that decided to take Hugo's philosophy and play suitably instead of playing to his own goals and sacrifice his desire and all of that stuff.
And I was wrong. The story completely subverts what I think Hugo's philosophy is all about. And he says, the second best is just another kind of ego. Being the best isn't the only way to live. Listen up, Isagi. I'll tell you about my ego as second best. So he's saying he has an ego as a second best, which is like, wait, what does that mean? Is that a weird contradiction? What does that really mean? And basically, this leads up to what I believe to be one of the best chapters in all of Blue Lock, which is Hugo explaining his philosophy while he ore farms and completely destroys Blue Lock and scores his own goal. Which I honestly got chills reading this chapter. Hugo doesn't just destroy Blue Lock in the game, he destroys Blue Lock as a story. He subverts everything we've learned up till now by basically proving that no, he isn't like Karasu. He isn't someone who has no desire. He is someone who has his own desires, but his desires just simply don't align with being a striker. They align with something far greater than being a striker, which is incredible. Because up till now, yes, we've had characters who aren't strikers that are egoists. We have Hiyori. He has a desire to create the greatest striker. But we still sort of felt like that ego was sort of lesser than that of a striker. We thought it was like a subservient ego to a striker. Yes, it is a desire. Yes, it is an ego. Yes, there is a dream behind it and a hunger behind it, but it's in a way inferior to that of a striker. We think it's like a second best kind of ego. It's like an ego that sort of, oh, you want to create the biggest striker because you can't be one. It's like a fetus in its own sense, right? But Hugo actually completely subverts that. Because I'll quote him directly. He says, for as long as I remember, it drives me crazy when I see humans fail or aren't aligned. It makes me want to correct their mechanism. And this mechanism idea is something we've seen a lot in his aura. Like, it's all very binary, a lot of gears, etc. Even his, like, yeah, we'll see. I was naturally gifted with that sensitivity. Actually very similar to Isagi also has that. I just can't help it. That's why whenever I meet new people, I tell them things will be better if you do this. If I try this, you can beat him. If you do this, you'll be more popular. If you do this, you'll be more loved. This is kind of a side tangent again, but when he says more loved, I think immediately to Kaiser. And Kaiser, we know after his flashback moment, we realize that his defining drive is to be loved. And he does that through soccer. So I'm actually very curious how Hugo and Kaiser will interact when they do fight. And I really want to see that. And Izuki's like, that's creepy as hell, you're a self-centered jerk. And I love this part right here. He says, yes, precisely. I'm just doing what I want, so I don't mind if you hate me. I love this response because it basically immediately shows egoism. He's not doing this for Isagi. When he tells Isagi, oh, this is what you should do, not playing suitably, you would be better as a midfielder, he's not doing it to help Isagi. He's doing it because he enjoys just telling people what to do. He enjoys fixing people like mechanisms. He enjoys fixing them like a machine. And I love that because at first I was under the impression that it was kind of like just bad writing. Like, okay, why is this guy just randomly want to talk to Isagi? Just because we want to talk about what the themes of the story are? It felt kind of ham-fisted. Why this character was randomly trying to help Isagi? Who are you? You're in the other team. What are you trying to do? So the story basically turns that on its head. We realize that, oh no, Hugo, the reason he was doing all that is because he just enjoys it. He just enjoys fixing people. He gets just a thrill out of that. So in a sense, it makes it egoist. We recontextualize this character trait as not just bad writing or whatever, or just randomness, or even proof that he just likes helping people because he's a nice guy. No, Hugo is an egoist, and this is what he enjoys. He enjoys fixing people, like mechanisms, like a machine. And he actually will elaborate on this further. I'm not doing it out of charity or spite. It's just that when my ideas cause someone to live more suitably, the world begins to turn anew. So this idea of the world turning, a lot of times when people start talking about their ego, their inner drives, it often ties back to that idea. We see that for Nagi, we see that for Isagi, we see that for a lot of people. But anyways, when people meet me, their destinies change, and producing people like that is utterly fascinating. He's explaining, I enjoy changing people's destiny. I enjoy making the world turn. Like this idea, it's an egoist idea. He's playing God in a sense, and he enjoys that. So he is actually an egoist. He's doing this out of desire. He is not doing this for anyone else. This is not like Karasu, right? We thought Karasu was sort of playing like Hugo, but no. Karasu was sacrificing his desire for the team, while Hugo is still playing to his desire, even when he tries to help Isagi with all this insight. And Isagi even says, this guy actually kind of like me. Because we see Isagi actually has a similar drive. He helped Onazi, told Onazi to become how to become a better striker, how to become more egoistic, how to not play for the team, how to play for himself. And everything that Ego was basically teaching him, he was teaching to Onazi, which I found really cool. So he's actually realizing that, hey, maybe I'm sort of like this too. It makes life worth living. So he's basically explaining this is what he lives for. This is his desire. He actually understands himself. He isn't someone who is purely playing for the team just because he has no desire. He's not playing, he actually enjoys what he does, making the world turn around him. And he does that as a midfielder. He makes the playmaking moments that lead to goals. And he's changing destiny as he does that. And he enjoys that. So there is egoism there. There is desire there. There is hunger there. And he's saying, my talent is suitable for this, for changing others to make the world turn. So I've never once wanted to be a striker. He never wanted to be a striker. He is not a defeated striker that just like say, who just, oh, I wanted to be a striker, then I couldn't, so I'm going to be a midfielder. No, he said he always played for what he was suitable to. So this guy isn't a kind of character who's eventually going to turn into a striker when Hisagi like defeats him, which is what I was thinking. Oh, Hisagi's going to beat him, and then he's going to realize he's a striker. Nuh-uh. This guy already knows what he's about. Already knows his ego. This guy already knows what drives him, and he is not a striker. He's a midfielder because that's where he's most suitable, or that's where he can change destiny the most. That's his desire. But he does have a desire, even though he's not a midfielder, he actually does have goals, which is, I want to win the World Cup as the second best and as a midfielder. Yoshi Isagi, did you know the world record for the most winning goals? It's 3 times by Pele, the king of soccer, is the only one to hold that record. As he gets ready to score here, he says, and that's why I will win the World Cup 4 times. And he kicks, he does not pass, and no, he doesn't pass to Loki. He kicks right towards the goal and gets the second goal of his team and completely surprises everyone, the whole field, by scoring. And Isagi says, Hugo's dream, it's huge. So Isagi realizes this guy isn't a striker, but he's a far more of an egoist than I am. He's far more of an egoist than me. That's insane. So he completely subverted this whole story. We always thought egoism means be a striker. The most egoistic thing you can do is be a striker. But no, you can have greater goals, greater desires, and far bigger dreams than just be a striker. You can just want to win the World Cup 4 times. So what does this mean for the story? What does this mean for Blue Lock?
So I think from now on, this matter of ego will be explored in Blue Lock. Types of egos that aren't purely about being a striker, that aren't purely about going for your own goals, egos that go beyond that. I want egos that expand beyond that. Desires that expand beyond just getting goals. I want that further explored. We see Hugo, he doesn't care about being first or second best. He doesn't see his desire in that category. He wants to be one of humanity's legend. That's a greater ego than even that of soccer. It goes beyond soccer. He thinks he can be put in the same realm as people like Leonardo da Vinci and like artists and people who we consider humanity's legends. I find that so interesting. He is someone who isn't thinking in the small scale terms that we see pretty much every other character thinking about. He's not thinking about scoring goals. He's not thinking about striker. He's not thinking about second best, first best. That's not actually how he thinks. He thinks in a far greater realm. And in that sense, his ego surpasses the scope of Isagi's. Like, that's interesting. How does he defeat and overcome someone with this massive ego? I want to know. But more specifically than this, I want to see other characters that aren't strikers, how their ego manifests. I want to see different types of egos that aren't all about striking. I want to see Aiku, for example. He's a character who we know he wanted to be a striker at one point, and eventually he let go of that ego. But I think he has an ego right now. We see Nico. He also has this defender ego. He enjoys shutting down strikers. That's a desire, right? It's not a striking desire, but it's a desire. And I want to see maybe through Hugo, we'll see these characters also develop their non-striker egos. Maybe there is a way for these defenders to actually have greater egos than that of strikers. I want to see what the potential of that is, especially for characters like Aiku, who seem to have a dormant ego so far. Or even Gagamaru character who we know he has some and she gets enjoyment from playing a goalie. Maybe there's more to explore there, like what is at the source of his desire and what are his goals and aspirations, and can they be something, can those aspirations rival that of a striker, right? Like there's so much more potential for non-striker characters to have an important role, to have their egos matter in the context of the story, to have greater desires explored. I also think Isagi will start to question Ego's methods a bit. I don't think Ego is wrong that when people all strive for their own goals, all for their own desires, that is the best way to play the game. But I think he also has his own selfish desires embedded into it, where he wants everyone to be a striker, wants everyone to play for their own goals. But I think you don't have to play that way necessarily. What really matters is playing to your own desire. If that's being a striker, play as a striker, right? But if you're playing, if Karasu, for example, if he truly discovered a deep desire to play as second best, that actually aligns with his ego, and he played that way, I actually don't think Ego would hate it as much. I think Ego would actually realize, okay, this person found his desire and he wants to play this way, and he's actually playing as an egoist. He's not playing as a striker egoist, but he's playing as an egoist. It's that manner of sacrificing your desire entirely where Karasu messed up. I think deep down he understands that not everyone wants to be a striker. Maybe when people look into themselves, they'll realize, I'm not a striker. I'm actually a midfielder. I'm actually a defender, and these desires aren't going to cleanly fit into a striker, midfielder, first, number one, number two. Like I'm actually something else in between. I'm not, maybe I don't fit into any clean category. These categories are going to be abandoned for something more specific and unique to each player, which is what motivates them. Striving for your own goals, not just like literal goals, but goals in a more general sense. That is what being an egoist is all about. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. I'm very excited. I like how the story is going, and I really love this character, Hugo, this antagonist. Really, honestly, one of the best antagonists the story has created so far. I like him more than Rin. I'll say it. I like him more than Sai. I like him more than Shido, more than Baro. He's a cool, really interesting character because he mirrors Isagi in so many ways, yet he is in a way a response to everything the story is. It's almost like an alternative version of Isagi, with a slightly different ego, but also a valid ego, as the story has just shown us. This is actually a valid way to play. But is it Isagi's? It's not Isagi's. So how does Isagi defeat him? I'm very excited to find out, and I want to keep reading this story. Maybe I'll make more videos just like this one, going over chapters and going over turn of events as they happen. And just whenever I get an idea, I'll maybe just record, and yap over it. So yeah, if you like videos like this, if you like me just yapping and going over these chapters, maybe subscribe, like the video, leave a comment. I want to see what you guys think. So yeah, take care, guys. Bye. Done with the